Hello and welcome to the 15th episode of the Fireside Chat. Today we will be talking about open source funding structures with a specific focus on Gridcoin and how we currently fund development and how we might want to fund endeavors in the future. A Fireside Chat is a weekly get-together of Gridcoin participants and anyone from any other community who would like to join. We talk all things Gridcoin, blockchain, cryptocurrency, science and cryptocurrency decentralization. This whole great world that we're part of. It is hosted every Thursday, 8 p.m. on the Gridcoin Discord server. That's midnight UTC. And anyone's welcome to join and talk. We have a text chat. If you don't have a mic or if you don't want to use your mic, you're more than welcome to participate through the text. And if you want a specific episode or a specific topic covered during an episode, feel free to reach out to any of your hosts and we will put it on the list of topics we've got going. We'll try to get it in as soon as we can. And those hosts are myself, I am Jay Ringo, and down below, as always, we've got the one, the only, the Goblin Popper. Say hi, Goblin.
Hello.
And in the corner, if you see a corner and you think it's a corner, it's not a corner. It's I Like Chocolate. Say hi, Chocolate.
Hi.
So we are here. Some of us may or may not be tired from celebrating the 4th of July in the U.S. yesterday, but we will get through it. So before we get into the topic of the day, we cover news. This week is not too much to cover, and I will say this, even though it's a little weird because the episodes aren't hosted yet, but there are 2 episodes in the Gridcoin in the Fireside Chat backlog that I have edited, ready to upload and everything. I just have not gotten to it because it's a busy week. So those will go up soon. If you're listening to this, there are 2 new ones right before it. And then for news, we had Barton26, who is the testnet coordinator, release another developer update. He does these every 2 Mondays, and they basically just go over what has been going on in the development branch of the repo. He just sums up the pull requests that are coming in and what they are, who's working on them, and he also talks about how testnet is getting put together and what sort of change they're working on to test on the testnet. And of course, if you would like to get involved with the testnet, which is a great way to contribute to development without coding a single line, reach out to Barton on Discord or Slack or anywhere, and he will get you set up. The main testnet channel is on Slack. And if you don't have a Slack invite, just reach out to anyone, any of the mods, any of the long-standing community members, anyone named labeled developer in the Discord, and we will get you a Slack invite. It's open, but it's not just open because we want to try and limit the amount of spammers that come in, number of bots. So anyone could get an invite, you just need to ask. And I will be sure to put a link to the developer update in the description below. Other than that, that is all the news I've got for this week. Does anyone else have anything they want to talk about?
Yeah, there's some interesting blockchain news. Apparently, there's a few different car companies, including Volkswagen, that are seeking patents for new blockchain technologies and communication ways between cars. So that's really cool that we see blockchain being used in that kind of method. And then some major tech company who will not be named signed a major deal with blockchain.
What does that mean, a deal with blockchain?
So while blockchain is open source, what companies can do is they can add their own proprietary models to it, enhance it, or just offer their own distribution of it, and then sell it. So pretty much means a major deal in terms of sale of proprietary software and future support for that.
Yeah, so that speaks to 2 things. Going backwards, the idea of companies running private blockchains is not anything new. It sounds like one of the first major ones that's coming out, but it is something that a lot of companies are looking into in terms of just running a private blockchain, which means that you as a company are in control of all the nodes that create blocks for the chain. That means you can actually put private information on that, or personal identification information on the blockchain because you have the ability to delete it as the node producer, the sole block producer. And the closest thing to what that is now, it's like, let's say you are Amazon and you have all your data on one server in a shack in Minnesota. For some reason, you put it in a shack. Now, that means it's a single point of failure. It's a centralized point of failure. Now Amazon can say, look, we have warehouses all over the US, all over the world. So instead of just having our server in one shack, all that data in one shack, we can have our data in multiple parts around the world, multiple locations. So there is no single point of failure. You would have to take down, to erase the data or to corrupt the data, you would have to corrupt 51% of all the nodes at the same time. So that is a huge benefit of decentralization. And one of the main reasons it came out, whether or not you like the private blockchain or the open source blockchain, is a whole nother discussion, but it's pretty cool to see develop.
Yeah, it was a $740 million deal.
Wow. Oh, and then the other one you said was cars. This is kind of relevant to Bitcoin and distributed computing, I think, because if at some point, and this is what people like dream about, this is like the cloud shop for cars, is you're going to have this automated fleet. You're going to maybe have companies that run an automated fleet, or you're going to have a sharing economy where there's a fleet of cars that are just shared between a lot of people, but they're all networked together. They're a large network. They have a lot of processing power, and they have the ability to share information. So what does that car do when you're asleep? Maybe you can use it to run the blockchain to produce blocks. Maybe you can use it to crunch science, to be essentially a giant supercomputer. Because you're putting all these processors all over the world, all over the roads, and they're not being used 24/7. So it's an interesting concept. There's a lot of security issues, but if you said that's a thing that's already getting done, that's ahead of its time, I think.
Yeah, it's apparently being looked at for, like I said, vehicle-to-vehicle communication for currently for like safety warnings. It doesn't go into too much detail, the article that I'm reading, but it effectively, it's like warnings on cooperative maneuvers and like efficiency of road usage. So if you're driving on like a major highway and cars 2-3 miles ahead of you are pretty much saying that they had to swerve around an accident, that might be one of those. It pretty much sends a message to all other cars to let it know that if you are also on this route or heading to this route, that that type of maneuver needed to be taken, is kind of what that's kind of alluding to, so that safety measures and self-driving actions are apparently logged and communicated. It's interesting. I guess I'm confused why you have to use blockchain as opposed to just a general communication method, but I don't know.
I'm sure they've got a pretty good reason, and we could speculate here, but that would take up the rest.
Probably marketing. I feel no. It's like blockchain. I always think blockchain is really, really, really cool. And then there's sometimes I hear how it's being used, and I'm like, shouldn't you just be using like a queue, like a messaging queue or a messaging service? And it's like, no, we're using blockchain. It's like, I feel like that's, yeah, like, can you just use a database or just like a log? And it's like, no, we're using blockchain. It's like, well, I feel like that's an overcomplication. Complicated. Just there's the train. I think it's just overcomplicating a very simple, potentially simple thing. But anyway.
That issue you bring up is actually a great way to go into the conversation we have today, because it's like you're using a buzzword for the marketing, like, ooh, blockchain, blah. So there are different tools that we have to use in different scenarios. So like yeah, oh my god, that's so let it out, Goblin, let it out.
What? I can't hear you.
Oh, that's great. So that's 8:23.
Yeah, this thing's 20 minutes late. These trains are terrible this last couple weeks.
Well, yeah, there's for example,
I'm sorry. As you were saying.
That's fine. The idea of decentralization and centralization in the blockchain space is a great sort of parallel here, because centralization isn't inherently bad. It's just that we've never had a way to run something without it being centralized. So there are a lot of things that could be run better as a decentralized system, but there are other things where centralization kind of makes sense. So that's an example of just two decision-making processes that exist. Decentralization or centralization are two just processes in general. They don't need to be decision-making. It could be a database, or you could do this blockchain marketing tactic. Now, when it comes to funding and open source, which is the main topic for today, and if anyone has any other news, please interrupt me. But there are different ways to fund open source developments, open source communities, and a lot of them existed for a long time. You can go back to Linux. Linux wasn't really funded. Linux was a system of volunteer work, people building what they wanted, what they needed to get their own work done, and then just sharing it, and as a community, building different things together and making and improving on the path. And that was the same mindset as the free culture movement with Stallman. Yes, yes, yes. So if you want to learn more about the history of it, there was a 1H episode on it. It's on the same YouTube station. Go back and look at it. It's called Open Source. But yeah, so that was the beginning funding model of open source. No funding, completely volunteer work. And eventually there was, people realized there was profit potential. There were things that could get done faster if you were paid to do it. Like instead of working 3 hours when you get home from work and being tired, what if you, smart coder, were able to make this your job? You are now working for something you want to work for, you want to build, and you don't need to hire or sell your time out to do something you don't necessarily find you're not passionate about. So people eventually started making companies, I guess. You know, they started just paying people, and they got together and they hired devs. Red Hat comes out of it. There were some other less popular companies that come out of this open source movement where they they would pay devs to get things done, and that it was still open source. Afterwards, the code would come out and they'd stand by their code. And while all of this is going on, there's another system called the bounty system, where everyone in the community says, we all want this done, but we are all working on other stuff, or we don't have the time to do this one particular thing. So what the community does is they pool funds together and they put up a bounty. They say, change the color of this from green to blue, or something definitely more complicated than that. And whoever does it and does it the best, and if it if it's the development is accepted by the people who put the bounty up, then the person who did it gets that funding, gets that money. So those are three very basic, very not basic, but the like pillars of open source funding. You have the completely volunteer system. You have the bounty system, which is somewhere between volunteer, and the third one, which is the corporate stand by your code system, where you build an actual entity that develops the code and then doesn't make it private, doesn't make it I forget the word, whatever Bill Gates did. Proprietary, thank you. But they stand by it and they're there to develop it and help people use it. So yeah, that's where we're at in the world. Blockchain has opened some other paths up that are starting to really get developed. There are a few different funding structures out there. You know, the ICO is one. ICO is essentially a group of people who release this software and get a bunch of money saying, continue to develop the software. That's a funding model now. There's something called airdrops that is becoming a little larger. That's a new funding model. Trying to think some more off the top of my head. There's the Bitcoin funding model. The Bitcoin funding model was volunteer at first. These guys, 2008 to 2012, 13, These were just people who saw the potential of this technology, and they worked on it on their spare time. If you read the old forums or the old emails between Satoshi and the early devs, it's kind of, there's some contention around it because of how much time they were putting into it for not being paid. And they say this outright, like, dude, I'm not your employee, sort of stuff. And then at some point, Bitcoin became worth something, and all these guys had, all these guys now had money, and so they started creating bounties and creating organizations with this money they had that would then hire devs to develop the code in a specific direction. And out of that became actually very large organizations and groups of people. A very famous group is Bitcoin Core. It's just a bunch of old developers, not old in age, but people who've been around for a long time in the Bitcoin community working on this stuff. And they have money now to fund, to make partnerships and to work for the betterment of this technology that they believe in. So that's a very unique business model because it, the Bitcoin blockchain produces a currency that changes how open source works in a large way, but we're not really, there's a potential that we could go down, but I think for this conversation, we might want to focus on the three main pillars. So that was a quick, brief, I tried to keep it brief, sort of rant on the history of OS funding structures and where we are today. Does anyone besides myself want to explain or talk about how Gridcoin is funded, how we fund development and other endeavors? I'm more than happy to if no one else wants to. All right, so I will go through that. I'll try to keep it brief. Again, I'm not great at this, so someone please cut me off if I go too far. So in the beginning, there was Rob and like what, 3 or 4 developers. They ran off the volunteer model where they just, they were the early miners of Gridcoin, so they got a lot of Gridcoin, and then they worked to better the code to increase their own wealth. They were able to be selfish in a non-greedy way because they're bettering the whole network, but at the same time, it's clear that they're increasing their own wealth. From there, we forked. So this was 2013. In 2014, we forked to a proof of stake blockchain from a proof of work. And when we did that, basically we had to airdrop, we had to share drop, whatever you want to call it, onto the new chain. So we had to take a snapshot of all the Gridcoin on the old chain and distribute it to the appropriate person on the new chain. The easiest way to do that is to say, hey guys, EOS actually just did this. You need to register with us, with Rob and the other developers at the time, and say, here are my coins on the old chain. Can you send them to this address on the new chain? And if you don't register in time, then your old Gridcoin, what's called Gridcoin Classic, will be lost. You'll never be able to get it because we just didn't know where to send it. So instead of burning all the Gridcoin Classic that was unclaimed, they created what they call the foundation wallet, which is it's just a wallet where all the unclaimed Gridcoin went. And for a short time after the actual claiming process closed, they were nice about it. They let people who came back in and were like, oh shoot, I screwed up. They gave some Gridcoin out to the people who didn't do it on time. But at this point, no, don't try. If you still have Gridcoin Classic, it's part of the foundation wallet.
How long ago was that done? What was that, 2015 or something?
October something, 2014.
Yeah, 2014.
I want to say it was, if I remember correctly from the forums, it was when some financial entity in the U.S. government signed on to some bailout or something like that. They made it cheeky. It was pretty fun. So, right, we forked from proof of work to proof of stake. There was a registration process, a claiming process for your new coins on the new chain, and anything that was unclaimed went to the foundation wallet. So that means the foundation wallet currently has between 30 and 40 million GRC. It stakes about 400,000 new GRC a year if it claims its interest. And that, of course, will change with CBR, but it stakes for itself. And So we sat on this huge lot of cash essentially for a long time. And just last year, I think, Rob came out finally with the proposal that said, let's pay our developers. So he went through the process. You can go back on the forums and look through the whole conversation at the time. And there was another, start there. We went through the process. There was conversation. It passed. We decided to pay the devs $30 an hour for approved work by Rob. Rob approves the work. He's the final say. It's like, okay, you're not scamming the system. This is actually kind of reasonable hours for that amount of work, usually $30 an hour in GRC equivalent. Then we had a second poll to raise that from $30 to 60 hours. So now that passed as well. So now we are paying devs who do coding work specifically $60 an hour for appropriate coding work that's still approved by Rob. So that is kind of like the stand by your code funding model that has been part of OS for a long time. We have that model. It's not very solid in its structures, but it still exists. It can definitely be improved on, but we use that to fund coding develop specifically. Other than that, there really isn't any clear-cut way to fund Gridcoin development, whether it's coding, marketing, outreach, anything like that. So of course there are the other ones. There are people who volunteer a lot of their time to do what they think needs to be done in the community, and they put in a lot of work, and it's amazing. And that will never leave. That's just who people in OS communities are. They like working for what they like to work for. But if we want to get more expensive stuff done, there's some things that cost a lot of money that people are not going to volunteer their time for, just because it would cost them like $10,000 to do all this stuff. I believe this is the conversation today, is how do we fund that sort of endeavor? Personally, I believe we can have a bounty system, or we can have other systems where there are boards that are granted a certain amount of funding, or you can vote people into power, or you can do all these things. So that's the question for today, is how do we fund more Gridcoin development without destroying the open source community? Is that clear enough for everyone? Are there any questions about the history of Gridcoin or open source funding structure? Cool. Then what does everyone think about that question? How do we continue to develop Gridcoin? Do people know what bounties are? Do they agree with them, disagree with them? Please, no more mayonnaise pictures in the chat, for the love of God. Anyone? Any thoughts on bounties?
I've seen them work pretty well. I'm fairly active in the Vertcoin community, and they use bounties to get stuff done over there, and it's done reasonably well for them of late. Things generally don't get done as quickly as the community would like them to, but that's how development works. One of the most notable things is they had one of their devs put together a miner that wasn't only useful for Vertcoin, but all Lyra 2 proof of work coins. And that was a big bounty through Vertcoin to make that happen for AMD cards. And that seemed to be a success, and that kind of funding structures, I understand that it has problems, but it seems to work.
I have a couple questions about it. How did they decide what to put a bounty on? Once they decided, where did the bounty come from? Who held the bounty? And how did they decide when the work was completed, so the bounty was released?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure on all of the details because I'm not, intimately involved with the development, right? But as a layperson on the side, they on their front page of their website, they had donate to this address for the bounty for making making an AMD miner for the Lyra 2 Rev 2 algorithm, and then it was just slowly trickled in from the community, one or two Vertcoin at a time. Slowly that built up, and when the miner was released in full, that bounty was paid out to that dev. How that was exactly decided on, I honestly am not quite sure. There was, I'm sure, some sort of vote somewhere, but I did not see it. In Gridcoin, we do have the luxury and advantage of having a built-in voting system, though, which is pretty awesome. We can actually vote on these things, and through the wallet, have a link to the discussion page for each vote and say, hey, we're considering putting together this, that, or the other thing. We want to put a bounty on that. If you want to make this, if you want to see this happen, donate to this address, and this will be held for this project's completion. Who holds those keys? I don't know. That would be like a remarkable escrow service, right?
Yeah, that kind of actually goes into a question I was going to bring up to Jerry Go, because I love you talking about the history of Gridcoin and just hearing you talk for extended periods of time. So I figured I'd ask more questions.
Hey, let me know when you're trying to take a nap. I'll just talk to the sleep, dude.
Thank you. Was it so? As someone who's been a part of the crypto community for, honestly, I always forget how long, but at least about a year now. I think it's been about a year and a half, maybe max. I honestly hear about bounties all the time, but I've never seen any. I don't know how they're made. I don't know how to actually make one if I wanted to, other than just telling someone in a Reddit post, I'll give someone X number of Gridcoin if they do something. And I feel like there are probably a lot of users who are in the same boat as me, in that maybe they have a stupid little thing that they want done, or they'd be willing to put a bounty together for, but they just don't know how to actually get it or use it. Or maybe someone literally just wants to help fund another developer and is like, yeah, I'm totally willing to throw $100 at this, just general fund, but don't know how to go about doing that. And then the other thing actually kind of goes to what Snips was saying, and I always thought this was really cool, where there would be another tab within the wallet. Q Barton saying that he doesn't want to have anyone develop that, but it's that there's going to be another like tab within the wallet that would just be like. I mean, in the distant future, I imagine it actually has a button that says donate X amount of Gridcoin, where you can type it in, hit enter, and it would send it to that address. And in a realistic sense, I always imagined it in the short term as something where either community selected or community developed, or voted on bounties were there, top bounties were there, where you would be given the address to say, hey, here's the current amount in this address, would you like to send it here and encourage more people to actually do it, right? And of course there's a lot of internal conversations that have to go around who approves the creations and all that fun stuff, but yeah, so anyway, so the question is really, how do you get started with bounties? Because even if I wanted to, I don't know how, and I don't even know where to look to really get that.
Sure. And then you said, there's a lot there, Chocolate. I saw you wanted to talk. Are you going to bring up a whole nother question that I'm going to have to try and remember the answer to?
No, I was going to, well, like tangentially related, but if you have direct response to him, you can go.
All right, yeah, I'm just going to answer his how to get started really quick, and then we can move into what has been brought up in the chat after your question. So basically you were right when you said you just make a Reddit thread that says, I want to give a bounty. Generally, you do it on the GitHub repo because those don't get deleted. and they're just easy to keep track of. For example, when myself and the group were putting together the white paper, we were doing it largely because we knew there was a bounty out there for it. Quez had 10,000 GRC up for it. I myself had put up 5,000 GRC, and the way that happened is, it might have been Erkin. I don't know. I don't remember who first made the thread, but they said, "Here's a bounty. I'm starting for a white paper." And Quez came along and said, "I'll donate 10,000 GRC to this bounty." And whoever started the post updated the initial post, and then I came along and said, 5,000 GRC is added to this bounty. Here are my conditions for releasing it. And I said, this is what I need to do. And yeah, Barton, pick up on this right after. So yeah, you go up and you say, I want to do this. I want to pay for this development. And if you want, you just say what the requirements are to release the funds, because you want to be clear that what exactly you want, and you don't want someone to come in with an unfinished product and be like, no, I spent all this time working on this bounty thinking that I'd get it, and then you as the bounty holder are like, well, you didn't really do what I wanted, and then they say, well, you didn't say what you wanted specifically. And Barton, please talk more on this.
So a good example, this was just a couple weeks ago. Nethlek, who's in chat here, opened a issue on the GitHub saying he would like a daemon command to manage UTXOs individually. So a command that would list them either by age, address, or balance, and then another command to select individual UTXOs for payments. He then put a comment on it saying he was offering a reward of 1,000 Gridcoin to whoever adds the functionality. I chipped in and said I would also put 500 towards it, and Nethlek suggested we make a bounty address, so I opened an address for it because I've held escrows for bounties before. So I opened an address for it, and then Jim, who's also in here, sent an additional 500. He matched mine. So the bounty on that is up to 2,000 Gridcoin right now, and that was just created 2 weeks ago. So, I mean, it's really easy to start. You really just have to say, hey, this would be something that I would, pay Gridcoin for someone to develop, and, here's what I would like to see, and here's how much I'm offering.
I mean, would it be outlandish to have a subreddit dedicated to that? Because I feel like there needs to be or some centralized location where people can list bounties that they like. Because I feel like that's really cool that he just posted that and people can start looking at it. But realistically, I think that it also lacks some visibility as to the wider community who might be interested in it, but never going to see it. Or people who, on the reverse, like people like me, who might see features that I'd be like, that sounds like an awesome feature, but I'm not going to develop it. But I can throw 500,000 Gridcoin at it and say, yeah, that sounds awesome, go to town. Right? So I don't even know that it existed to support it, and then I feel like there's a ton of people who don't know it exists to actually work on it. So is a subreddit or something similar that someone might be able to come up with outlandish, or does that make sense?
Say that, Netflix. Say again.
Maybe another Discord channel for that?
Oh god, another Discord channel. Well, hold
or
on.
A Slack channel, but I mean,
the beauty of these static forums on GitHub is they've been used for years. This is the way it's generally done. It's the way developers are used to it. But also, if we go back to what Snip said about what was the coin you were talking about, Snip? Vert?
Yeah, VTC.
Vertcoin. He said that they had a very UX-friendly front page that just said what the bounties were, and people knew about it there. If you look at other communities, there's Dash and Monero. They have two different governance structures. One of them has master nodes, and another, not exactly sure how Monero works. But they also all have bounty pages dedicated to it on websites where people can put up a bounty or start a bounty, and then it gets voted, and the more popular one gets to the top of the list. And then once that bounty's, like, it's a Kickstarter thing, once that bounty's thing is reached, then usually someone comes along and does it because they're like, I'm going to get a bunch of money for this. This is awesome. So you have a point about visibility, but doing it in just a Reddit thread or a Slack thread or a Discord channel. I'm not sure if that's going to be. It might be more work than it's worth in the long run.
I mean, yeah, maybe, but there does need to be an escrow service. So I know we have things like that in the grid. Was it a market grid? That we have for sales of Gridcoin and such. But I mean, and I know I talked about this last time with having the centralization of a decentralized open source community, right? I think it makes sense to have a website where there just be a page that's create an account on the website, and then once you create an account, you can feel free to post bounties, right? And people can contribute to that, and that's managed through the website. But I don't think we have an official website, and I don't think Rob would let anyone add that to it.
I think that's something we can do, honestly. If you look at the link Snip just pointed, and I'll put this in the comments below, or in the details below, description below, jeez. It's the vertcoin.org/donate page. It's just very simple, and it's got a bunch of bounties up there. And there you go. That's something we could build. The questions about who gets to put stuff up there and who gets to hold escrow, that can all be sorted out. That's minutia. It's nitty-gritty minutia. It needs to get done, but it can be sorted out with the people who already exist in the community. Because, for example, Barton holds escrows because he's a trusted member of the community who does a lot of work, and if he just takes money and runs off, is like, okay, why would he do that? We trust and know this guy, essentially. Like, fine. So you can't just let any newcomer come in and have that sort of responsibility, but there are enough long-standing members who would be able to build some sort of network around holding escrows and whatnot. So
Chocolate had a point. Hold on. Chocolate had a point like 10 minutes ago.
I think it's.
I still want to hear it. I don't care.
I think there's like a middle of the. Well, I don't want to say middle of the road, but so one. I definitely agree with the idea that we should have bounty support in the wallet. So to what extent, we should have it. That's a matter, of everybody's personal opinion. I think, we've talked about this idea like on several occasions, actually on several shows, about the, so I brought up, for example, for funding in microgrid, we all send money to some account, and then that account disperses that Gridcoin over all the people who are crunching it, and so that could be a way to fund your own projects. Well, in a very similar manner, what we could do is we could have everyone who, so let's say we already have inside of the wallet a list of all the bounties that are up. The way we could do it is we can send money to this escrow account that operates by an atomic swap, and whether both sides of the agreement have fulfilled their ends of their obligations could be voted on democratically. But assuming the community says, okay, we all say that this 10,000 GRC is going to this person because they actually did the work that they were supposed to, that could be a way to fund bounties that would, one, be inside of the wallet, and two, it would also be a much more concrete promise of it would effectively be guaranteed by protocol, not guaranteed by escrow. And I guess that's the second topic, like I wanted to bring up a while ago, which was, well, I mean, so is escrow the way to go for in perpetuity, or can we create some kind of a built-in protocol, atomic swap that can guarantee the same level of security?
I think.
Go ahead, Goblin.
So I was gonna say, I think that so Jay Ringo and I when we were talking about what were kind of the topics that we might cover this week, and we kind of came to this one. We were going back and forth about what we would talk about and such, and this actually kind of came up on my side as well, which is, we like bounties, and we could do some algorithmic key system, right, where it just if people get handed in, you can just give it to an automated account. The problem that I kind of came up with was it really comes down to where that is and what it's managing, because there's a significant number of situations where you need a human set of eyes to make sure proper things happen. For like the rain system and for things like microgrid, I guess it kind of makes sense, right? It's all it is just distributing it. But if there's any kind of approval process, there's going to have to be a mediator between people, I guess.
So here, two responses to that. I agree with Popper, and I also like what Chuck was saying, because I think putting it in a protocol is at the core of blockchain, getting the human touch out of there. But at the same time, that is building it into the protocol. That's a lot of work. And when it comes to practical reality right now, I don't think that should be high on the priority list, because there's the escrow system that has been working for decades that we can still continue to use. But I think ultimately getting it in a protocol would be awesome. The thing about getting it in a protocol that makes it more complicated is a general flaw with bounties, which is, how do you know that it was completed to the satisfaction of all the people that put it out there, that donated to the bounty? You need to have a smart contract, essentially, or a dumb contract, any sort of contract that says very specifically when funds would be released, when work is completed. And you have to deal with, what if there are multiple people working on the same project at the same time, and someone just spent, they both spent 40 weeks working on it, but one of them finished like 3 days earlier. So they basically came up with the same solution, or maybe one's even better than the other. How do you choose between the two? These are issues that are best solved by humans, I think, at the time, for the time being at least. So you would need someone to, just to less segment to people who, for Dash, for example, they have a masternode system. So the masternodes choose which development to follow. And that is good for some reasons and bad for others. There needs to be a solution to that issue. And I know Chocolate and Snip are trying to say something.
I was just going to quickly say that what I was saying earlier is that whether both sides of the agreement fulfill their obligations should be left up to a democratic vote, because I agree with you that it is very complicated, and at the end of the day, it's subjective. Whether this was completely done. I mean, in some cases, it's kind of really obvious and subjective, but in some cases, it's complicated, which is why it should be left up to democratic consensus, I think.
In my opinion, since we have voting capability on the chain just built in right now, we could have this be a 2-layer vote where someone proposes a bounty, and there's a vote to say, should this bounty be added to the official bounties in the wallet? We have a page in the wallet that lists the active bounties. That makes it very easy for any user to donate to that bounty. And then whenever a dev completes the bounty and submits it to the community, those that funded that bounty get vote with their share of what they funded as to whether the dev gets that payout.
That's sort of like an AVW system for each bounty, each individual bounty.
Yeah, except it's calculated via the amount of Gridcoin that each person donated to the bounty is their vote weight.
I also think that, just as a side note, because Jay Ringo and I were also kind of talking about this, was I think that there also needs to be, instead of whoever brings it first to the table wins with the larger bounties, I think it needs to be a time frame. Like, you are given 4 months to come up with something. Whoever shows up within the 4 months is evaluated. And then that is the end of phase 1. And then there's a phase 2, right? And then, like, if yours is not selected during phase 1, that's fine. You can use the other people's material to start during your phase 2. And then the phase 2 goes for how many months, stops at the deadline, evaluated, so on and so forth, right? Because I think the first come, first served model is never going to work. because otherwise you're going to have people who just show up with a lot of bugs, but a technically completed product. But otherwise, I agree.
That's fair. One thing I'd like to point out is that my suggestion does leave open the possibility of making it just a straight smart contract where everything is automated. There doesn't need to be human intervention or centralization here, or trust. If the vote passes to give the dev the payout, then the dev gets the payout.
Right.
Basically, right. I mean, it may need some human interaction to say which dev is the one that is contributing, but these things could be figured out by people that are more familiar with the topic than I.
So there's a system that is similar to a bounty and sort of similar to what you guys were just talking about. I don't know what I would call it, except for a reverse bounty, where instead of a bunch of people saying, we want this thing made, here's money, someone come make it, someone who can make something that they know the community wants just from following discussions and being part of the community says, I want to make this, I will do this, here is my asking price, here are the steps I will take. I ask for X number of GRC after step 1, X number after step 2, X number after step 3. And this is the system that's used in Dash and I think Monero as well. And it's the system we're using for the current UI, GUI redevelopment proposal, where we've been talking about this publicly about we want to make this a little prettier. We want to bring in some utility that, especially with polls, like bringing polls to the main page. And just it's been really hard to get it going. And a couple people have given it like different starts and sort of progressed it. And then someone stepped up and said, I can do this all the way. Here's some of the work I've already done. This is my vision. Let me know what you think. People gave them feedback and they integrated it almost instantly. So it's like, all right, this person's here to actually do this. They're capable of doing this. And they're asking a fairly reasonable amount. So we put together the proposal, which says this is what they're asking for. This is what they're going to build. They're going to put it all on GitHub afterwards. They're going to be our assets. And it's going to be signed off by 5 devs and combination of devs and admins and mods. They're not mods of like Discord mod ops, people who have been in the community for a very long time and are respected by nearly everyone. So that it's like a bounty, except it's a developer stepping forward and saying, I want to do this. This is what I'm asking for. Does the community agree with this? Can I do it? And those, I think, generally go a little smoother, but the downside to it is the person needs to know what they want to do first. It's not the community asking for something. It's someone saying, I will do this specific thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. So I think a great part of, what might become of bounties in the Gridcoin community might be people saying like, listen, I can do this and I want to do this. Can I get this funded? Because we might start seeing some really creative stuff that we haven't seen before. If that happens, and not necessarily even just in development either. Maybe even in marketing or advertising or something like that. So yeah, I definitely think that there's a lot of space for people who want to contribute and already having ideas, trying to get that funded, as opposed to trying to get a bunch of disparate people to agree on funding 1 or 2 ideas.
Yeah, and actually, as another comment, it's like, I think figuring out this. Sorry, I was typing I was accidentally typing. Sorry. So yeah, I as another comment, I think that figuring out this funding problem would also help kind of jumpstart some of the development work in Gridcoin. I mean, obviously paying the developers helping significantly because people are now seeing return on their contributions. Instead of having to wait for kind of the Bitcoin model where you work on something so that it gets more profitable later. But with the bounty system, I feel like that'll help even more. The one thing I do kind of that I've been thinking about during this conversation, I just also want to bring up is, in its current form, a bounty is, I have a request, even on like Reddit, doesn't matter, I could literally just ask anyone, I'll give you 2,000 Gridcoin, make this feature for me, that'd be awesome, right? They make it, that's cool. Now what do I do with this feature? I'm assuming there's a wall of people that would have to approve it to get actually added into the official blockchain or the official wallet. So if that's the case, which I believe it is, so people aren't just dumping random features into the project on GitHub, I feel like if there is a centralization of who approves things to be put on, there needs to be a centralization of things that are being requested as to reduce waste and kind of centralize that stuff.
Jim or Barton, do you want to take that one? Yeah, that does make sense. And I can respond a little bit to it. I mean, I'm not a dev myself, so Jim or Barton might be able to clarify that issue a little more. But there's the main repo, which is run by Raven, and I forget who else has access. Rob has access. But the way it works is anyone can fork it and and work on their own fork of the core client. And if that feature that you're talking about doesn't get integrated into the core client, they can decide to release a second client. This happened with Bitcoin, or all of a sudden there are 100 different clients, some of them with different features, and other creates competition. Is kind of healthy for the ecosystem overall. But a new client is going to be less vetted than the core client, which is there from the beginning. It's got the most dedicated devs working on it. But it's still a very good thing to have these forks working on secondary clients. So you're right, but it's not. So the question is, do you pay someone if their feature isn't integrated into the core client sort of stuff, right?
Well, not that. It's like, if effectively in the current form, right? I either have to go to GitHub and post my bounty and say, I really want this thing, or post it to Reddit and get a dev's attention where they say, you're right, that would be cool. We'll pretty much accept that if it gets produced, right? Or I just put it out there that I'd like it done. Hey, I want this patch done. Someone says, sure, did it. I pay them. I now have the code. And then I go to the Gridcoin dev and I'm like, hey, I fixed, I had a bounty out. Someone fixed that bug. Here it is, right? Here's the fix. And they're like, oh, we don't need that. We already either fix it our own way, or we don't plan on fixing because stuff like that is changing, whatever reason, right? But in both cases, I still need to go to a level of the development team to make sure that my bounty is either valid or usable and not waste, right?
There needs to be a certain amount of conversation, which is required. You can't
prior
just
to the bounty being filled, or even really put out there.
Yeah, you can't just come in and do something. Go, Bart.
As a condition of most of the bounties, it's usually, this bounty will be paid out upon implementation of this feature. It's not like, the person doing the task for the bounty or whatever, or writing the code or whatever, is in a bubble. It's usually, they're on the development team or in contact with the development team. And, it's not like, oh, hey, I just, did this user requested feature, let's put it in the wallet. And, the development team's going to be like, no. I mean, I can't really think of any situation in which that would occur unless the new feature is like some kind of security risk or something, in which case the person should have probably consulted before making it. But in most cases, it's really, it's not an isolated bubble, the person making the solution for this.
Okay. Yeah, and I'm not saying that devs are creating a wall, right? I don't want to make it sound like they have a very tight filter that they're only letting in 5% of things, right? I'm just saying is with the development team working on it and the smaller community that the small but tight knit community that we have, I just don't want to see wasted work where, say they accept 95% of things, that 5% is like, it's stuff that it's time that could have been spent doing productive things if the other teams were kind of mixed in and working together. So I guess I worry about what little waste there might be.
You also have to remember the development team itself is quite small. I mean, we don't have, a ton of developers constantly, all over the place. We try to, everybody's looking at GitHub, everybody's seeing what's going up there, and, I'm fairly certain that most of the developers are pretty on on point with, keeping up to date with the newest issues and requests that people are putting up on GitHub. So again, it's not like a bubble. I see what you're saying, and I think maybe in the future, if there's a much more large or fragmented development team, you would see that kind of problem. But as it stands with the current size of the development team and the size of the community, I don't really see, these features getting left behind, because there's just the amount of people that can solve the problem and the amount of people that can implement the fix are usually the same group of people.
Okay. But if I had, for example, a bounty for like implementing Doom, I'm assuming that would still get kept out.
Well, that would be up to if someone wanted to put the time into it to then get told maybe like that's not a smart idea. That person would have to, think, is that worth putting that time into?
$1 million GRC.
It is. It definitely. If anyone's
It's worth
listening,
$1 million
it's
GRC.
worth it. It's worth it.
No, I could totally worth it.
Everyone else is on board with this part.
Yeah, I want to hear the opinion of some other devs.
Yeah, Jim, if you're here, I would also like to hear what you think about funding and bounties in general.
I thought we were talking about Doom.
Oh, about Doom? Oh, awesome. I don't think he's here either way. But Doom is going.
No, I'm here. Can you guys hear me? Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, yep.
I was muted because my family was talking. I have a sort of I have a hybrid view of this. I think that it's really hard to effectively totally decentralize this type of process, because at the end of the day, it's a mixture of what the community wants, but there also has to be some architectural stewardship of the code by technical folks that are really close to the technical details. And so in reality, there's sort of an interaction that develops between the developers that are on a project that know the code from a deep technical perspective, and those people that are looking at it from a lay perspective and want features. And I think, at the end of the day, there has to be some feedback effect of someone wanting to, either a feature is needed by the community, or the reverse might happen. A developer might suggest a feature that they think is very important. I think the community needs to get a vote in it, but it also, the devs that have worked on the project and have essentially some leadership role also have to look at what's being suggested and make sure that it's technically sound and makes sense to do. And so I think that, it's not like you can have it purely one way or the other. And it's a hard balancing act, I think. And, you also have a big problem in there are small bounties and large bounties. So, there are projects that are relatively quick, that can be done very, very quickly and efficiently. And then there are very large type of projects that quite frankly carry a high risk of failure, that, have entirely different pressure points on managing them and making sure that they're successful at the end of the day. So it's a tough call. I mean, this one that we were talking about earlier with Netflix and Barton, it actually originated from a conversation that I was having with Netflix on here on Discord and then on Slack around UTXO management and how difficult it is to do raw transactions to deal with UTXOs, because he doesn't want to use the GUI. And I think that at the end of the day, that blossomed into a discussion. Well, why don't we actually build a new RPC command or set of RPC commands to do it? I told him I thought that was a great idea, and then that sort of turned into a bounty situation. So, in that's a scenario where someone came up with a feature, ran it by someone that's got some technical background, and then a bounty was created, and it sort of meshes. It doesn't always work that neatly though. So it's pretty tough to come up with a completely standard process, I think, that works for everything in all directions. And I think you have what Barton said. You have this situation where sometimes you have normal bounties, and then sometimes you have reverse bounties, where people come up with ideas and also say, hey, this is what I think it's worth to do it. So, we have to handle all those type situations.
I think you bring up a lot of good points. And I've had nothing to respond to him about, but I did think about something when you were talking about that. When it comes to the ecosystem of developers, people who are technically minded and are able to code, of course, we have the people who are here for a long time and are doing all the work right now, which is very much intimate work with the code, and they're understanding things at levels that a lot of developers coming into the community are not going to get right away. But what bounties do is they create the awareness of Gridcoin as a place that a blockchain developer can come, work on a project, fall in love with the project, and get paid for it. Because that is a type of job that exists now. It's bounty hunters, where they go around and develop blockchains.
So yeah, we need new people. I think that's the point you're making, and I agree with that 100%. I mean, part of this is to encourage additional participation besides the same core group of people that are working on it on a day-to-day basis. I think is what you're saying, and I agree with that 100%.
And I think a great way to do it is to have a bounty system where we develop bounties regularly and put them out on Reddits, on different communities where these bounty hunters look, and they can see that okay, there's something that this community needs. I'll come in and I'll do this one thing, and I'm only doing it for the money, but we're Gridcoin, they'll fall in love with us. So it's that sort of, this is a great benefit to bounties. I think there are a lot of flaws to bounties, a lot of which Jim just highlighted, I think, beautifully. But this is a benefit I see that I think we should maybe consider fairly with a lot of weight as we think about how to move forward with development and funding this sort of stuff.
So do you think we can actually make a bounty soon, or just not right now, but could we realistically just throw up a bounty right now that just said 10,000 15,000 GRC to whoever makes a tab within the wallet for bounty maintenance? Is that realistic, or
a bounty for the bounty system?
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, but that's how it has to start, right?
That's called bootstrapping, guys, and that's a perfectly reasonable approach to this. To offer, you'd have to use the existing sort of bounty structure to kick this off, but then that sort of takes you down the road of a much more protocol and structure based bounty system that would probably help Gridcoin a lot at the end of the day, if you could get it done.
I mean, if people kept it, if there were collapsible structures where you could organize based off of size of bounty or size of current funding of the bounty, and then also based off of estimated time frame, and then also based off of is this programmatic or is this some other kind of bounty? Like maybe someone wants consolidation of some kind of information or non-programmatic work, non-bug fixing. There's a ton of ways to filter it, where I think that you wouldn't have to limit anyone specifically from putting any bounties into the system, because that would be the next question is, who are we stopping from putting it in so it doesn't become a mess? And the answer is, well, if you create good enough filtering or good enough descriptions that they have to put in when entering the information, we wouldn't have to prohibit anyone. Because I know that the whole voting system thing with needing 100,000 to add a poll is a little bit of a sore subject to a lot of the smaller small-time users of the platform.
Yeah, I think I just agree with you. I got that. I think it would be a cool thing to build. And Barton says we could maybe rope it into the current UI work.
But I don't even know where that exists. Like, it's just, if I'm not part of the dev team, a lot of, and I assume it's just on GitHub. But then I have to find where that
hold on.
exists.
Did you look at the wallet, bro?
No. I'm saying I understand the work you're talking about, but you're saying when you say rope it into the current work, that means that there's a place to rope it into.
Yeah, there's a poll out, and in the poll there's
Is
a
there?
link to the description, and then in the poll description it says if you have ideas to put in front of the devs' eyes, you can either post them here if you don't have a GitHub and we'll forward it, but if you want to just get them right in front of Max's eyes, go to this GitHub thread and post your idea. And several people already have, and he's just like, yes, that's a great idea. Let's see if we can make this work. And
Gotcha.
if it becomes a much larger task, the funding might need to be reevaluated, but ultimately, I think that's something that's very easy to do because unlike pure bounties, we have this foundation. So we made this reverse bounty asking for money from the foundation to fund this specific development. And then if there's other things that want to get thrown on top of it, we can be like, okay, this is the amount of money that's coming out of the foundation. We're not changing that because that's what the poll is. But if you want to add to this bounty, to this funding of this development, go ahead and send GRC to this address, and it will be coupled in with the funding coming from foundation. So it's sort of like a foundation match system. And I think that would be very useful when creating bounties moving forward. For example, you make a development that says, we're going to raise a bounty for this development X, and we request that the foundation match up to X amount of GRC, depending on how much you raise as from the bounty sort of stuff. So sort of a combination of bounty and centralized funding, which I think would be cool. But definitely, Goblin, look at that. Look at the description. Look at the poll thread and go to that GitHub. And
Yeah, I mean, my wallet's always on, but I have two screens for my actual computer, and then right next to that I have a third screen that's just never on that runs my two Pis. So usually I just, if I don't know about a poll, it's because I just haven't turned that computer on or the screen on in like a week and a half.
Fair, yeah. Anyone else who hasn't been following along, the poll is up to 160 some odd votes. It's still going. Be sure to vote. I'll say this again at the end of the chat.
When does it end, and what's that current percentage in weight?
I'll get the stats up and I'll close it off at the end of the call. But we are at about an hour now. We can go a little late because this is a pretty intense conversation. Great subject. I'm loving it. Does anyone else have any thoughts they want to get out there for we can fit in the next 10, 15 minutes?
I kind of really want to hear from people in this chat, because this whole topic kind of got hijacked from open source funding to Gridcoin bounties, which tends to happen with our stuff is we come up with a topic and it goes down like what a lot of people want to talk about, which is great. I mean, as long as everyone's kind of...
I was the one posting mayonnaise for the first 10 minutes.
I commented mayonnaise. I never posted anything. I actually posted a Mayo Clinic, which is a health organization. Anyway,
okay.
But the point being is, I would love to hear from people in the chat, in the current chat here, if there's any funding styles, since that is technically the topic, funding styles beyond bounties, beyond the current proposal that you think Gridcoin should take advantage of. I don't know. I feel like bounties and the current proposal structure are probably the two things that cover 95% of what Gridcoin is funded by. Do you guys see using anything else or anything like that?
I've got some if no one else wants to. Okay. Side staking, I think, is an amazing tool. It's basically utilizing microtransactions and the concept of getting paid for producing blocks to fund things. It's used with Pinkcoin. We talked a little bit about it in an episode previously. I hope we get to spend an entire episode on it in the future because it is an amazing tool. So I don't want to go too in depth on it right now, but that is one. Another is board managed funds where, for example, let's say we have 5 to 11 amazing marketers in our community who have proven their commitment to the community, who have done work and are clearly here for the betterment of the community, and they ask for a lump sum of GRC, saying we want 100,000 GRC, for example, to develop marketing proposals. Here are some of the proposals that we're thinking about implementing. We'll let the community vote on some, but in general, we just want to be able to make quick decisions, you know? So it's a use of centralization to fund development. That would be another one, and that could exist as a development group, a marketing group, an outreach group, a design group, anything. Those are two right there. I'll stop there if anyone else wants to talk.
I know Robotic Mind commented he likes the idea of paying an hourly rate for things other than writing the code. So kind of goes into the proposal, but I know the proposal obviously is covering developers, and we have a lot of other people who are contributing other aspects to the community that are not given any funding, which, you know, it's like which of those people should be given funding or given any kind of compensation for their time, you know, social media or people who help write the blue papers, things like that. There's a lot of us doing a lot of stuff. So yeah, that's not one.
I think expanding the hourly rate system is not a bad idea at all. For example, paying the core devs more than newer devs, I think is reasonable. The reason that works right now is that we have coders looking over the code to make sure that it's reasonable work in a reasonable amount of time submitted. If you wanted to do that with something like marketing, we would need professional marketers or people who've worked in marketing who are paid to look over the work done in marketing to say, this is reasonable amount of work for the reasonable amount of time, the amount of time they do it. Auditors, Martin, yes, great, thank you. We would need auditors. And that, I don't know, we have code auditors because we're an open source code tech. We don't have marketing auditors for now, but I think we could. And if we did, I think that expanding the hourly system would be fine. But that is the one problem I see with it. It's not having auditors. And yeah, these auditors would need to be paid. I'm going to scroll up through the chat because there were people talking about a lot of stuff.
Do we have enough developers right now?
We could always use more, is I think the phrase that I would kind of go with. Well, how many do we have right now? Like 6, 8? Something?
You can look on the GitHub and see how many people commit how much stuff, but between 5 and 10. Which is up from last year, which is up from the year before. So we are a growing group of people working on this project. There's no doubt about that. But we talked about this a little bit before you got here, I think, Anonymous. Building a bounty ecosystem that we then present to outside developers would help attract more like new blood sort of stuff.
Gotcha.
And I think the bounty system's obviously the best way to help get people, because I mean, how do you get compensated for being a developer? You probably have to kind of what we were talking about last week, which is you have to get notoriety in the community and eventually kind of be accepted on as someone who's reliable and someone you know is going to actually work and it's not a security risk who's submitting code and such. But prior to that, a good way to build that reputation could be a reliable system of bounty, like bounty hunters, right? You start off, before you become a developer, you start off almost like a bounty hunter, and you do at least a couple bounties or at least 1 or 2 so that you can show, yes, I know how to do this, this is what I've submitted before, I think I'm ready for the actual payroll level. I don't know, just an idea.
I think that makes sense. You work your way through the bounty system up to an auditor level where you can help approve other people's work and you get that reputation in the community.
It's all about reputation.
It's all about the karma.
Isn't there a song about that?
So could you just quickly rehash the bounty system? Like, are those are the bounties foundation funds, or how does that work?
No, we're talking about bounties as a individually promoted activity. So if you specifically wanted to get a new feature added to the wallet, you would say, hey guys, I'll offer 5,000 GRC for X, right? And how that would work and moving forward. And to kind of summarize most of the talk is, I know that just ways we would handle that moving forward, escrow accounts, and what I kind of proposed towards the end was having a tab within the wallet to manage bounties so people could submit them, look for them, and see what people are asking for and such. And also donate to existing ones.
Okay, gotcha. So it is like basically user funds. Like, so that's to avoid having a whole foundation pool and everything. It's just like, oh, I want to have X feature, and then I put the money down.
It's supplementary. Obviously, it's not because it's you need developers to actually do core funding, core development. But bug fixing, feature requests, or maybe additional things that weren't in the annual budget, but you like it in it. Easiest way would probably be to just say, hey guys, let's get a 20,000 GRC bounty. I'll put down 5,000 of my own, and the bounty will be available as soon as it gets enough funding at this escrow account or something.
Nice. Then I guess we'll wrap up here unless anyone has anything else they want to add.
I have one quick question. Is there somewhere that we can donate GRC that would then go directly to the devs? Is that set up?
You can give it to me. I promise I'll give it to them.
Here's the way that usually works. We don't have you can donate to the foundation pays devs.
I suppose that makes sense. Sure.
But what used to be done, I don't know if this is still done that often, but people would post a private address for Bitcoin saying, this is my work. If you want to support me, buy me coffee, donate whatever you want to this address, and it will go straight to me. I don't know if each individual dev has their own donation address. I think they should. I think that is a great way to fund developers to keep them around here, and that can actually be incorporated with side staking, but I won't get into that. So short answer, no. Longer answer is donate to the foundation if you want it to go to the salaries, or convince them, ask them. If you ask someone like, what's your donation, give me an address, I want to give you some GRC. They'll more than likely be like, cool, thanks. You don't need to, but thank you. And that is a way we could actually solidify that a little more as an actual funding structure, where you support a dev, and as they get more support, they get more reputation, more power. But that's complicated, so we won't go into that today. Yeah, anyone else have anything briefly want to ask or add before we wrap up? Cool, then I will say really quick that the poll is at 2.8% total network weight right now. The proposal says it needs 15% to release the funds. It's at 20% AVW, but it's not using AVW for this poll because it's still a new poll and it's asking for funds. Or AVW is still a new system, a new metric, and we're asking for funds, so we didn't think it was appropriate to use a new metric. And other than that, we will be wrapping it up. We talked about the bounty system Goblin was describing. We also talked about reverse bounties, which is like the UI proposal where it asks the foundation for funds. And we talked briefly about the combination of the two, where it says we're asking for a bounty and we would like the foundation to match the bounty up to X number. So those are three different types of bounties that we could build. We talked about how maybe we could work these into the wallet, making them more structural instead of sort of this freewheeling escrow system. And we also covered a few other different funding models that we should maybe explore more in the future. If this is something you want to be part of, reach out on any platform, Discord, Slack, Telegram, what have you, and just start the conversation. If there's no specific channel for it, I guess the general channel or the economics channel on Slack would probably be appropriate, but wherever you see fit. And next week we'll be back here, same time, same place, Gridcoin Discord server, 8 p.m. Eastern, midnight UTC. Who knows what we'll be talking about, but expect a post sometimes next week saying what it will be. I think that's everything. Yeah, have a good weekend, everyone.